when when if Hassan posts a video of him lifting weights, that in and of itself, it's like a himbo act, right? It's
Right.
it's like it's
Himboic.
like you are himboic. Yeah, it's aesthetically himboic because himboic. That's good.
Listen, I like himbos. To be honest with you, I fuck a himbo. To be more honest, you would fuck a himbo. I unfortunately am not a himbo. I'm far too capitalistic, cynical, and Nigerian to be one. But love me a himbo. Representation for the big guy, but it's just happy to be their guy, the support main. We love to see it. But what makes the himbo him? That guy eating pies and lifting up kids to the sky when they cry. Our golden retriever, buff baby, undiagnosed ADHD fave. Himbo is not a meme, it's a mindset, a philosophy. Head empty, heart full, thick thighs. Like a wise person once said, to be a himbo is to be kind, dumb, and hot. But I feel like that's a little reductive to my favorite lug nuts, so therefore I would like to introduce a slightly more nuanced conversation of himbo-ness in media, specifically how it relates to masculinity and the importance of representation in boys' media diets. What I want to do today is talk about the utility of the himbo as a trope, how it's evolved through the ages, and ultimately answer the question, is this something boys should aspire to? Should boys venture out to become less heroic and more himboic? Let's talk about it. Yes, I literally took one gender theory class and I will never shut up about it. That's Tayo. This is Color Mind, a place where I like to talk about things that I've thought about so maybe you can think about them too. And let's talk himbos.
I think the main way to describe it to people is the way that a lot of people describe himbos, which is golden retriever energy.
My personal definition of a himbo is I think that there are kind of like four primary characteristics that make a himbo.
Can be there for just like eye candy, or just like, oh, you're not going to try and have too deep of a conversation with this person, but you have a good time with them. And
he is kind. He is I guess conventionally attractive slash, strong, big and buff, that whole thing.
I guess you would add the kind of like a little bit dumb or a little bit naive perhaps, or a little bit simplistic to complete the himbo archetype as I view it.
He is simple.
Usually stupid, portrayed as like, or at least naive.
Not necessarily dim-witted, for lack of a better description. A friend of mine actually earlier today said it's not dumbed down so much as zenned out. Like that's so someone who kind of knows what he's about, is kind of living in his own world, and someone who has good intentions. So the good intentions are really important.
They're very like open-minded. They're very like, they're just there to go along with the adventure, as opposed to being like so directly in charge, like that like super masculine like leader vibe. They're just sort of like, okay, let's just go with whatever's gonna go on here.
What is your personal definition of a himbo?
For me, it's just like a conventionally attractive nigga that's like not the brightest, and he's usually like the butt of the joke. And a lot of the times they're portrayed as very masculine and like buff, but they don't, in my opinion, they don't have to be.
Well, I guess, yeah. So a sexy man that is nice sounds like a sick guy. It sounds awesome.
So Zilla, what I'm trying to find out today is how long have we had himbos? How ancient is the idea of hunky, strong, stupid men?
I would say that's pretty eternal, but it is complicated. It is definitely complicated. Hi, I'm Zilla Black. I run the YouTube channel Zilla's Athenaeum, and you can find me most everywhere at Zillable, spelled like syllable but with a Z. I like to talk about lefty politics, board games, and most especially ancient literature and language, which is my area of scholarship. I have 2 advanced degrees in the study of ancient Greece and Rome. I think probably the first one everybody thinks of when you're talking, the ancient Mediterranean, you're probably thinking, oh, Hercules.
Right.
And for some depictions of Hercules, absolutely the case. But there are definitely a lot of ancient Greek texts, especially comedies. The Greeks had some annual drama festivals. The ones that we have the best records of are the Athenian city Dionysia and the country Dionysia. They had these comedies. In a tragedy, you might see Heracles depicted in one of his darker moments, where there's a whole story where Hera sends the concept, the impersoned god of madness, to make him kill his own family, his wife and his kids. And that gets very dark, and in some cases fairly explicit. But on the comedic side, you get this very himbo character. He's a little bit slow on the uptake, and he is always all about food. He's always hungry. He's always lustful, and he is just like this big dumb doofus. Goes around breaking stuff because he doesn't know his own strength kind of doofus. One thing that I was thinking about, the conception of what is masculine is so cultural, right? We have this tendency to simplify when we look back as far as ancient Greece and say, oh, well, manly warriors go out and fight mostly naked with bronze, and women staying at home. And that's, it's not like they didn't have that. But a lot of the lines that we would imagine today are very different. It's considered, in American culture, it's considered unmanly for somebody to cry, right? They did not go in for that at all. There are depictions of every hero you can think of crying his eyes out. Theseus, Heracles, Achilles, Odysseus, all the big names, you get to see them cry and be emotional. That's not at all unmanly.
After talking with Zilla, I got a good understanding of how long himbo-ish characters have been around in literature, but I still didn't feel like I had a grasp on the appeal of the himbo more generally. I think in order to do this, whatever the fuck I'm trying to do, we'll want to break down the DNA of the himbo, what its essential parts are. Maybe then we'll be able to look at those individual traits and see where the himbo comes from and how he's evolved to be so likable. A genealogy of the himbo, if you will. The himbo is built around the frame of the powerhouse trope. The powerhouse in a 5-man band dynamic usually refers to the team's main damage dealer, who provides brute strength and physical power as their main character trait. Usually referred to as a tank, or basically my favorite character in any ensemble cast, most likely. This archetype is important because they often serve as the team's muscle and are responsible for taking on the toughest opponents and the obstacles that the Lancer and leader might face, but they're usually like mooks. They don't have backstories or whatever. They can serve as the goof or the lovable oaf to the more straight-laced or eccentric Lancer or leader. Their laid-back approach to life can often be helpful and useful to grounding the team and keeping them focused on their goals without everybody getting burnt out too quickly. Overall, the powerhouse is essential to the 5-man band dynamic because they provide a consistent source of strength and stability that the heroes will need to overcome their challenges and succeed in their mission.
Now, the powerhouse is a character archetype, but it might be more helpful to think of them as a narrative role, a character who's defined by what they can do more than who they are. The powerhouse's job in the plot is simple. They strengthen the heroes. They can hit harder, tank more damage, smuggle in a hilariously improbable arsenal of weapons, hold off the army of minions while the hero runs off to advance the plot. The narrative role of the powerhouse is to be powerful enough to do the heavy lifting the heroes need to do. Essentially, they're in a weight class of their own, and their presence elevates the rest of the team to a higher level. The powerhouse's appearance is often used as a narrative signal that it's gonna be alright, guys, the cavalry has arrived.
I saw a great explanation of the utility of this archetype on Overly Sarcastic Productions. Love OSP, please go check them out. And what I love about them is that when you see them coming, you usually know that their presence means that everybody's going to be okay. They're like the cavalry. They do one thing, and they do it really well, really reliably, and 99% of people always appreciate them despite their flaws in other areas. And most importantly, they're simple. The powerhouse is the shield and the cleanup crew. It's consistency in its pure shonen form. This simple skill set allows them to fulfill their narrative role, but basically be a blank page when it comes to their own personality outside of is big and is hungry. This allows powerhouses to have very dynamic personalities if the writer desires it, but I think often we see the powerhouse written to be, a very friendly or very likable member in the 5-man band, at least to me anyway, and I am the person who has all the correct opinions, is because of the contrast between their appearance and their affect. Haha, muscle man also likes garden. That's not how men work. Usually the leader and the lancer are a little bit too mysterious or off-puttish to be automatically likable in the eyes of the audience, and the smart guy is often a cynic due to their intellect. That leaves the only hole for the big guy to fill to be its unlikeliest, a wholesome softie in everything but combat. And so, we get the Himbos of the first wave. First wave Himbo. Regardless of when they were actually created, this is less of a time thing and more of, like the entire Himbo, more of a vibe thing. But this is where I place characters like Michelangelo from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Iron Giant, Thor in Ragnarok. No, I haven't seen it. Why do you ask? The Flash? Could y'all actually comment and tell me about this one? I don't watch CW shows, and I don't even know if Flash is Marvel or DC. I think it's DC. Korobara and Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho, depending on how you squint. I think Korobara clearly fills that Himbo archetype based off his personality and the fact that his kind of character arc is hard work beating talent. But Hiei is literally the biggest damage dealer, which kind of puts him more into the narrative role of what a Himbo is supposed to do. We have Jet Black from Cowboy Bebop, who is kind of like a jerk with a heart of gold. And then of course people like Sanji from One Piece and Chewbacca from Star Wars. I also would really like to put Worf from Star Trek in there, but Trekkies, could you confirm that for me? Because I actually don't watch Star Trek like that. I've been trying, but like it seems long. I should go talk to Jesse Ginger or some shit. Basically, long story short, they are closer to a jock or a meathead, but with more maybe inherent people skills and only slightly less protein packing. These piles of brick and 2 brain cells are strong but not forceful. They are imposing, yes, but then why feel the need to impose? I think their natural charm comes from the contradiction between their size and their spirit. The gentle giant, able to crush watermelons between their thighs with ease, but more apt to tell a joke or blow bubbles with a small child to a similar applause. It's an applied strength, always available when needed, but when it's used, it's often to the benefit or the protection of others. Big, hurt me but make me feel safe energy. Like that one couple from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Fucking love them. Goals. Case study, Goku. Goku embodies this ideal for me, and probably like 95% of other black males in the United States. A character from the popular manga and anime series Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball GT, and the like. He is often considered a model of masculinity for boys, and it's easy to see why, right? He's depicted as being physically strong, brave, and always willing to protect his loved ones. Goku also has this strong sense of justice and a desire to better himself, constantly training and striving to increase his power level as well as his weave collection. Despite being faced with seemingly insurmountable odds at times, well, all of the time it's a shonen, Goku never gives up and is always willing to put himself in harm's way to protect him, his family, and his friends. In the series, he's always fighting against powerful villains to save the world, whether it be Frieza, Majin Buu, Android 18 fine ass, Vegeta's bum ass,
mean, it is what it is. We already knew you were gonna get your ass whooped.
What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about right now. You are nothing. You're nothing. No, you're nothing. You're never gonna be stronger than me, so why are you even talking?
This bravery is a valuable lesson for young men, showing them the importance of standing up for what they believe in, for what they think is right and wrong, especially when it comes to those that they care about, even in the face of danger or ridicule. Throughout the series, Goku is faced with challenges, problems, adversities that he has to find a way to overcome, and through that he becomes stronger. That determination, that perseverance is an important lesson to young boys, because even though that might be like a manosphere or like a red pill talking point, this idea of continually striving to keep going, to focus on perseverance versus perfection is key in being able to actually in the real world strive to reach your fullest potential, because it's not always going to be oh, I put in 10,000 hours and now I'm going to be good. Sometimes after 10,000 hours, shit's still hard. That's the point. That is what the grind is. That love of problem solving, that understanding that it is not about getting it right or wrong, but it's about just solving to get to the next stage. Also throughout the show, Goku is depicted as being selfless, the type of person who will literally put his body on the line to sacrifice himself for the people that he loves. This selflessness is another valuable image for young men, showing them the importance of putting their needs above others, right? Understanding that just because, or even because you may have power, it is then imperative for you to use it to either protect others or to advocate for those who don't have as much power as you. Goku has a strong sense of justice. He knows what he believes is wrong and what is right. And throughout the series, as he fights against injustice and evil, always standing up for what is right, that strong sense of justice shows kids the importance of always doing what you feel is right, even when it is difficult or unpopular. All these traits are often seen as desirable or even aspirational by young males. Then add in Goku's easygoing and kind nature, as well as his unyielding determination, plus his amazing vocal cords, and you can clearly see why young Kakarot would be an appealing role model for young children. Hell, even young adults that are aspiring towards a more traditional type of manhood that still centers wholesome qualities. I'm gonna quickly switch to my boy Freddy for this last point, because Fred is the best character in Scooby-Doo, bar none. He's strong, he's supportive, he's a cheerleader, and yeah, he's a little stupid, but are not most white men? He even has a niece interest as a hyperfixation.
I just like Ness. Nets are great. Nets can do everything.
But most importantly, he's emotional in the very basic sense of the word. Fred, especially throughout later reboots, feels. Fred feels a fuck ton. To me, Himbos are sincere, but not spineless. As we heard in the other section before, it's not abnormal to see men be emotional in some certain cases, but the Himbos display emotions at times that would be seen unmanly to a lot of other men or within the realm of hegemonic masculinity. But they don't do this to rage against the masculine machine. They do it because they don't know or are unable to stonewall their feelings otherwise.
Oh, I need to tell you something and I need you to listen. I'm not a guy anymore.
What?
I have feelings.
Or perhaps they know when they choose the simplicity of expression rather than the prison of gender. In any case, their instinct is towards expression and towards empathy. At a minimum, they always express genuine sympathy. Maybe it's because they've been through similar hardships, but often it's because to empathize is their natural temperament, the engine that they solve problems through. I mean, how can you know what's going on to solve a problem if you don't know what that person with a problem is feeling? Overall, to me, Himbos are men that aren't the best at being manly, but ultimately seem content in their own personal brand of masculinity. And we love that. All this is cool and all, but as we can see from the way that people regard, characters like Frank and Fred and other Wave 1 Himbos, this trope needs an iOS update. Enter the past couple of years and a renaissance for the tank for Mr. Himbo himself. And I'm calling this the second wave of Himbo. When we think about this second school or second wave of Himbos, Himbo-ness, or Himbology, it's very clear, like, BFFR, they're all built off of Kronk's foundation, right? You saw the thumbnail. I know that's what you're here for. We're finally going to talk about it. Kronk, the ever-lovable character from the 2000 Disney animated film Emperor's New Groove and of Kronk's New Grooves fame, represents a positive model of healthy masculinity through his various traits and actions. We all love Kronk. Who the fuck doesn't love Kronk? Except for CDX, that fucking poser. He is the perfect model of what a good man should and can be. Good-natured, well-built, house-trained. Kronk is cool because he's confident in himself and in his abilities. Despite being a little rough around the edges in the intellect department, he's not afraid to pursue his passions and his dreams, like being a chef and later in his own movie being a mentor to young children. He takes pride in his work and isn't afraid to put himself out there, to take risks, even if they don't always turn out as planned, because that's life. And that self-assurance that he has is a really essential and crucial aspect of not only his personality, but of healthy masculinity in general, as it allows individuals to pursue their goals and their aspirations without that nagging feel of failure or imposter syndrome. Must be nice. Kronk is compassionate and kind-hearted. He shows a deep sense of caring for his friends and his family, going out of his way to help those in need. This is evident even with his relationship with Yzma, his boss, where he consistently shows her love and support despite her constant mistreatment of him and of his interest. He also has a strong sense of loyalty and isn't afraid to stand up for what is right, even if it means going against authority, much like my man Goku. This combination of empathy and bravery displays a positive example of what masculinity, of what a man can be, especially when their masculinity is centered around relationships and valuing the greater good over personal gain. Another aspect of Kronk's radical masculinity is his ability to laugh at himself, right? And not take himself too seriously. He's unapologetically goofy, silly, and more importantly, himself. Not afraid to make a fool of himself in the name of chasing his own joy, right? This lighthearted approach to life is refreshing. It's nobody wants Batmans all the time. Like, you're not Rick. This lighthearted approach to life is refreshing and shows that one can still be confident and assertive without being uptight or rigid. Just because you have a set of morals that you abide by doesn't mean you need to be an ass to everybody else. Kronk is also a good listener and a communicator. Let me say that again. Kronk is also a good listener and communicator. Throughout both films, he's shown actively engaging in conversations with those around him and is always willing to lend an ear to someone who needs it. This skill set demonstrates that a successful man does not have to dominate every conversation in order to be valuable, but can and ultimately should also be able to be an active listener and provide support when needed or when asked for. A concept. You can't just take all the time. Part of being a good person, but also just a person who can read the room, is knowing when you need to also give, when that's also your turn. Which is something that I kind of fear a lot of boys actually don't get to internalize, because in Western culture, to be a man is to be a person who doesn't take no for an answer, who needs to win and therefore get their way all the time. And these boys therefore don't understand that not only is that unfeasible and unsustainable, but also you're not gonna get your dick wet that way, I promise you. And finally, Kronk displays physical strength and athleticism, which is often associated both with himbos and traditional forms of masculinity, but he doesn't use this physical prowess to intimidate or harm others. He instead used it to help those in need. This more benevolent and utilitarian representation of physical strength highlights the idea that true masculinity, true manhood, relies not on brute force, but in how that strength can be used to make a positive impact in your society, in your neighborhood. And once again, he is simple, not stupid. He's great with kids, he's multilingual, a team player, and most importantly, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty in the kitchen. This scene from Emperor's New Groove, the diner scene, is one of my favorite scenes of animation cinema ever, because it just perfectly encapsulates why I think Kronk is like the platonic ideal of like a wave 2 himbo. Does it matter that we're trying to kill a head of state right now? Yes, but also breakfast matters, and Kronk solved what he could instead of worrying about what he couldn't. You know, Kronk is not just a head in the clouds idiot. He just has special niche interests and uses the few tools that he can use at a master level to solve the problems that he can. So Kronk is Another positive model of healthy masculinity due to his self-assuredness, his compassion, his sense of humor, his strong communication skills, and ultimately physical prowess, his dedication to physical prowess. He demonstrates that one can be confident and direct and assertive without having to come off as rigid or aggressive, and that true masculinity lies within being able to use the strength that you have in order to put out more good in the world than bad, especially through small kindnesses interpersonally. So with looking at Krunk, I think other characters that I'd have to throw in this generation are Mori Senpai from Ouran High School Host Club, Bolin from Legend of Korra, Jake from Adventure Time, a Cyborg from Teen Titans, and I guess probably also Teen Titans Go. I imagine maybe like even more so. Number 2 from Codenamed Kid Next Door. I think his name's like Toby. I'm gonna have my editor look into that. Thank you. Garen and Zach from League of Legends, obviously. But nominate some more for me in the comments. I would love to hear who you guys think also kind of fits in this camp of like the new and improved himbo, and sort of your reasonings behind them. I'm really excited to see them in the comments. But let's do a case study on someone who you may or may not agree is a himbo, whether due to his intellect, body frame, or penchant for off-the-dome haikus.
They call me Sokka, that is, in the water tribe. I am not an oaf.
I'd like to add to this family tree of himbo-ness my favorite Boomerang Boy and Moon Spirit Mac Daddy. Let's talk about Sokka and Sokka's Master. So Sokka's Master is an episode of the animated TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender. Maybe you've heard of it. It focuses on the character Sokka. This episode, not the whole show that focuses on the Avatar, who is a member of the Southern Water Tribe and the resident plan guy for our intrepid gang. In this episode, Sokka leaves his friends and ends up training with a sword master named Piandao after feeling particularly unimportant after the 3 main benders on the team are able to save a village from turning darker than meat. As a non-bender, he couldn't do much, right? And this made Sokka internalize that lack of being able to bend as a lack of value altogether. And poor boy, I've been there.
That's rough, buddy.
One of the main themes of Sokka's Master is his journey towards becoming a more competent and capable warrior. Throughout the series, Sokka is usually seen as the comic relief guy, and therefore feels like he's not taken as seriously by his friends. However, in Sokka's Master, he learns that he does have the potential to be a great warrior, and begins to develop a deeper sense of self-confidence and respect for himself. So around 8 minutes in, we see Sokka pull up to like PD's crib and immediately turns into a beta male cuck soy boy and says he doesn't believe that he is worthy of being Pindao's apprentice, or anyone else's for that matter. In response to this, Piandao does the normal thing of training him anyway.
But the truth is, I don't know if I am worthy.
I see. Well then, let's find out together how worthy you are. I will train you.
Despite him literally saying he doesn't think he has worth, Piandao chose to help instead of hurt. So this is where I want to talk about a concept called empathetic masculinity. Empathetic masculinity refers to the idea that men can be strong, confident, and in charge while still being in touch with their emotions and showing, well, empathy to others. It's about embracing vulnerability and having the courage to show empathy, show compassion towards others. This genre of masculinity allows men to connect with their emotions, to be in touch with their feelings, and ultimately show sensitivity towards the feelings of others, which is all really good people skills, in my opinion, especially in contrast to the norms of our society, where men are often taught to be tough, unemotional, and aggressive, which can lead to a lack of empathy, surprise, and a disregard for the feelings of others. If you're watching this video, I'm not the first video essayist that you've ever come across. Most of us now understand that toxic forms of masculinity can be harmful to men, as well as being harmful to women and other marginalized groups, as it reinforces gender-based violence and oppression. You see, empathetic masculinity is not about being weak or soft or a beta or whatever, but rather about having the actual alpha courage to be vulnerable and to acknowledge and express your emotions, because that is hard. It is hard, especially if you don't grow up with that, with learning that language, to really look inside yourself and say, here's how I'm feeling, and then try to explain it to someone else so that maybe they can help you, or at least you guys can reach an understanding. This type of masculinity allows us to build stronger relationships with others, to be better communicators, to be more in touch with our own selves. And honestly, what is masculinity if not the pursuit of strength in all areas of our lives, right? So anyway, swords are trans now. Swords have been used as phallic metaphors throughout history in various cultures and mediums, often serving as symbols of power, strength, and masculinity. The sword, with its long phallic shape, has been used as a symbol of male power, often associated with warriors and knights. In many cultures, the act of wielding a sword has been seen as a rite of passage into manhood, representing the transition from adolescence into adulthood and the acquisition of male power. In literature and art, the sword is often used to symbolize the virality and the power of male characters. In works such as Beowulf and The Lord of the Rings, swords are portrayed as powerful weapons wielded by brave and noble heroes, representing their strength, courage, and skill. Similarly, in Japanese culture, the samurai sword is seen as a symbol of the samurai warrior's power and martial prowess. In addition to the symbolic significance, the physical act of wielding a sword can also be seen as a phallic act. The movement and control required to wield a sword is often seen as representative of male dominance and control. Do we love a metaphor? Even the simple thrusting motion of a sword can be seen as a metaphor for the act of sexual penetration, therefore reinforcing the idea of the sword as a phallic symbol. So while Sokka trains with Piandao, he teaches him that the sword, and by extension masculinity, is a simple tool, but in the hands of a master, it can be whatever one's mind can perceive.
Think of it as another part of your own body. The sword is a simple tool, but in the hands of a master, it becomes the most versatile of weapons.
Like I said, swords are trans now. A real master, a true master, is able to express himself, his manhood, freely. Once again, masculinity is the tool, not you. And that's gender, boys. From a gender study perspective, Sokka's master can be seen as a good representation of masculinity that challenges harmful and restrictive gender norms. By depicting a male character who is able to embrace his emotions, who is able to show empathy towards others, especially those that are, in the case of Piandao, that are technically lower than him, while still maintaining his strength and his assertiveness, this episode offers a more diverse and inclusive definition of masculinity, shows how fuzzy those lines really are, and how in order to really be the type of man I think a lot of people want to be, you have to learn how to control these softer sides of yourself, not limit them, but how to actually use them to connect with others and to, as we said before in the earlier section, to put more good out in the world than bad. I think my favorite scene in Sokka's Masters is that basically last scene when Sokka, after spending several days to create his own sword, to make his own version of manhood as it's being presented to him by his master Piandao, he reveals to him that he's not actually who he says he is. He's not some person from the Fire Nation colonies. He's actually a member of the Southern Water Tribe. And in response to that, now we gotta throw hands. So Sokka has to fight this big boss and literally has to defend his manhood. And what I found so interesting about it is that while Piandao is fighting Sokka, he's also giving a master class in like constructive criticism, because like he has Sokka on the ropes while also pointing out what he's doing well. And even though Sokka loses, because this nigga is White Lotus verified, he still affirmed Sokka in the progress that he had made in the time that they had spent together. He let him know that winning this match was not actually the important part, right? It was about showing off the strength and skills that he had acquired through his discipline and training. But it begs the question, so why did Piandao train him anyway? And basically it's because, he didn't see color. He also sees value in Sokka, and I think the lesson there is simple. You are not what you lack. And for me, this serves as an extremely important message for young men, as it encouraged me to break free from harmful stereotypes about what it means to be a man, and embrace the more nuanced, the more well-rounded definition of masculinity.
And now, sports.
So off to a fall, then too hard on myself. Hold well comfy atop my delts, I just tighten my belt. So I'm not worried about no nigga that just type in a text. Go to Ramsey, you can speak to the chef. A drum break, make a nigga reflect. The backwood for the daily de-stressing. Good, never let me forget. It's the little things I try to protect. Plant a seed, pray it bloom into another moment. Yeah, yeah. This shit feel like touch football on a black tie. Dark skin bitches and then y'all smile. Like I'm Himbo. Like I'm Himbo. Like I'm Himbo. 1781, Age of Enlightenment. White men are finally realizing that maybe they deserve some rights. Meanwhile, Mozart in a strip club playing sonatas on a bitch titties. It's all good. The opium is as pure as the morning snow, but you want to see some real shit? Because I got it. Crack, critique, pure reason. I promise this shit don't mess you up. So at the end of the 18th century, Kant writes this critique of David Hume, this other white guy, and he makes the case in his work, Critique of Pure Reason, that yes, while we as humans may be limited to sensory-induced experience, we nonetheless contain what he called a priori cognitive structure, or knowledge before experience, that allows us to construct the world that we perceive. This makes us an active knower. Do you kind of see what Kant's saying here? We experience the world, not the other way around. There's no way for us to get all of the objective facts about nature, about the world we live in, and then we would know the true world. The universe is not Dragon Balls or Pokemon cards where you can just catch them all. Facts indeed may care about your feelings. Inevitably, our experiences shape how we see the world. Our experiences are what allow us to know the world. Now we fast forward to the 20th century, we meet Jean Piaget, who looks at his Swiss watch. Anyway, who looks at his Swiss watch and squints into the 1934 sun and says, only education is capable of saving our societies from possible collapse, whether violent or gradual. Time to shift the entire paradigm of childhood development theory. Constructivism is a philosophy of education rooted in Piaget's theory of cognitive development. I know you don't care, so let me put it in a way that you Gen Z hamsters might retain a little bit more. The two most important takeaways from constructivism is that learning is inherently a social process. You are not given things to just upload into your mind like an AI bot. It's embedded within a social context as students and teachers work together in order to build knowledge together. As such, we can then see that knowledge is not directly imparted to learners, to students. Or to put another way, we learn best through experiences, not through exposition. Constructivism says that learners construct knowledge actively through experiencing the world around them, and not passively by just taking in information and copying it. As people go through their life and reflect upon their experiences, your first crush, your high school graduation, the time you took a girl to go see Ender's Game in theaters and you tried to awkwardly hold her hand for the entire feature-length film, only for her to run out as soon as the credits roll and in the morning text you that the book was better. We build up our own representations and incorporate this new information into how we think specific parts of life work, also known as schemas. Because we don't just absorb class rules or social norms, we need to internalize them. They need to make sense in the bigger story of our life. As children, we make whatever rules that are given to us work for the most part, because they need to work. This is the world that we're born into, so it needs to remain as consistent as possible. For Piaget, this type of cognitive adaptation was reliant on the development of cognitive schemas, which is a term he actually borrowed from Kant. Through constructivism, knowledge is constructed more organically and more efficiently when people are engaged in active learning, when they get to experience trial and error through their peers and are able to model various behaviors to figure out what works and what doesn't. AKA, I think healthy masculinity is constructivist, right? Healthy self-esteem is reliant on your ability to try on different forms of masculinity and see how they make you feel until you can find the parts of being masculine or parts of being a, perhaps hegemonic man that actually, you do jive with. So you can pick up that and maybe leave the rest. Having high self-esteem is key to having a high self-identity. you can go ahead and watch this video where I talked about that. And if you're a returning person to this channel, you know that having high self-esteem is key to having a healthy self-identity. If you're new, go ahead and watch this video. But if you aren't allowed to do that, if you aren't allowed to express yourselves, or if you feel like it's against the rules to express yourself, that's literally toxic. You literally are not treating yourself well, because your body, your mind is meant to express itself, is meant to experience the entire spectrum of humanity. And if being a man requires you to cut off parts of that humanity, is being a man worth it?
Like, I think from a lot of shows, Himbos are my favorite because they're like, it doesn't have to be like this deep thing with this character. Like, it's just a simple-minded character that you can just relate to because they're simple-minded. As a not bright nigga myself, you know, it's just nice to see.
Representation.
Exactly.
Seeing well-written himbos in media is important because inevitably this is how young boys socialize themselves to become men, not always just through their parents or their teachers, but in this third place. Even though I'm not a himbo yet, I can't help but feel that the fact that I grew up resonating with so many himbo-ish characters informed how I moved throughout the world and how I ended up growing up. I feel like it taught me that it was okay for a guy to be kind. And that sounds stupid to say out loud, but what I mean is that, like, I would get rewarded rather than degraded for showing kindness. And if I hadn't met certain non-masculine people in my life to show me that, I did go through life thinking that if I was not tough, if I did not have a strong but silent demeanor, you know, I'm being a bad man. A man doesn't show emotions. We leave that, you know, to the femmes, not knowing that I was literally cutting off, honestly, at this point, I can now say more than 50% of my entire being. So what did the himbo teach me? Is there anything about the himbo that makes sense to you now that you're older that didn't make sense to you or was annoying when you were younger?
I think so. When I was younger, I actually a lot of the times felt like the dumb guy in the room. I felt like I kind of have a little bit of, like, honestly, an insecurity about my intellect, because in the social circles I was in, I was kind of nervous a lot of times, and it would be tough for me to, like, keep up. And so I would be the butt of the joke, not in like an insidious manner, because I'd play into it, just be like some of my favorite bits are to just say something really dumb and just pretend like I'm being serious, and that I still do that. But I think it felt like a part of the performance to, like, fit in, but also like something that made me feel not that great, you know, and not that like struggling to keep up with this social scenario in order to, like, have people like you or whatever, is a lot of kind of work almost. And then just over time, I feel like as I've kind of lived life and experienced things and learned to be more comfortable with who I am, that sort of willingness to not know everything right away, and to not like even to not know anything, and to not feel like I have to know anything, and just kind of, I guess, I've kind of come to accept that it's okay to be dumb mentality, because with it there's the caveat that you can listen and learn.
So I have I mean, I don't want to, like, totally throw a wrench in. I have some kind of complicated thoughts on this one, because, like, I personally, you know, you probably figured out by now that I love himbos. I think in a lot of ways they reaffirm some, like, negative stereotypes about, you know, traditional masculinity, just in that in some ways they're kind of born out of the, for lack of a better description, like, incompetent buffoon character, you know, that, like, the sitcom dad, like the Homer Simpsons and Peter Griffins, like these, you know, kind of mediocre guys who are portrayed in ways that are, it's really, like, it often involves a lot of, you know, like, male specific body shaming. Like, these guys are considered undesirable because, you know, they're fat guys or they're balding or both. Like, this whole idea of that character, and it's taking, you know, kind of the foolish guy, but it's making him attractive. It's making him desirable. And I think in a way, like, that something about that doesn't really sit well with me. It says that, you know, these traits, like being a bit of an airhead is permissible if you're hot enough. And I kind of have some mixed feelings about that for, you know, obvious reasons. I think the other thing too, to kind of like play off of that, is I wonder how much of it goes back to, like, in order to be a man, you have to tick a certain amount of manliness traits, right? So what I mean by that is, you, like, where the himbo is concerned, do you have a hard body if you're going to get away with having a soft heart? And I think about that a fair amount. Like, is this push to, you know, sort of achieve physical masculinity a way of earning yourself the room to not have to exact psychological masculinity?
Right, like the idea of like, you know, perhaps I can ignore the fact that I'm not good enough at locking my feelings away like a true man if at least I look the part, so that I don't have to worry about that as much. How much masculinity can I store away to counter the vulnerability that I want to feel? So we arrive at the end of this journey to try to answer the question that we posed in the beginning. Should boys aspire to be himbos? Is the himbo the antidote to toxic masculinity? Do you think men should aspire to himboism or to try to be more himboic?
I think it's probably very rare that a man would aspire to be a himbo, just because of the naivety aspect that's like couched in there. Like, most people don't like aspire to have that like naive or like come across as like both stupid and hot. The hot part, yes. I think people should, well, specifically men, I think men should aspire to be whoever they actually are, without all of the like all the expectations and all the things that get put on them, because it's a lot. Like, I go through forums sometimes just looking at like there's some really good positive feminist based men's forums on Reddit, which I know sounds like a lie, but
can you name drop?
Yeah, Men's Lib. They're very chill.
I do follow them. Yeah.
And seeing some of the conversations they have sometimes, it's like crushing the level of expectations that men put on other men and men put on themselves and society puts on men. Luckily, as soon as I realized I was queer, I was like, okay, well, I guess I don't have to play this game. Like, thank God. Nobody would have believed it anyways.
Takes my balls and go home.
So like, it was, for me, looking at it from a feminist perspective later on in life, and trying to also get rid of that mentality of like men's problems and they're caused by men, because that's not fair. Like, some 12-year-old boy who's being like pushed into like this patriarchal role is not his fault because he was born a man. Like, it's very important that especially these younger men, are given just the opportunity to be themselves without all the toxic messaging, which is difficult because they have the internet.
It's freeing for people because hegemonic masculinity is such a narrow box and such a stringent like space that you must occupy in the view of someone who is ascribing to that and just like traditional kind of views about it. It's so intensely suffocating, and for a lot of men, I think a lot of men I know have so many different expressions of masculinity and so many different expressions of themselves that may not even be that like masculine traditionally, but they are men, and that therefore makes it masculinity. Like, that's kind of the whole thing, like you mentioned. So I don't know, it's like it's important, it's good, I think it's healthy. I think even in the same vein, having people that are like adhering to those traditional standards while also being, also shucking off this sort of more toxic and problematic elements of it, I think is really important. And yeah, because of the prevalence of kind of like the resurgence of regressive attitudes as thing like feminism moves forward in online spaces and social spaces, the obviously flares up more like manosphere adjacent stuff. And I guess the kind of just having more men taking that like this like two pathways picture of the like the pretty house with the sunshine and then the demonic like witch, you know, the two paths. It's like which way Western man, which way young man on the internet, like just having that there, I think is you know, it's good. It's not like, it's not saving the world, but it's like stuff's going to be on there anyways. So if we can like construct a generalized understanding, just like get people educated, get people to on the same page about how this thing affects all of us and how it can like, if this masculinity is pervading our lives in a negative way, how it can affect us and the people around us, and then what to do instead of that. I think it's all good. 2 thumbs way up for me. So
just going back to that whole idea of like what a man is and what masculinity is, that like they put out a casting call. They gave you all of the specific performance traits that they're looking for. But are you making the role yours? Are you making the role yours? Because what's really going to make it compelling, what's really going to make it interesting to people, what's really going to make you an engaging person is if you are making it yours. And to do that, you have to know who you are. You have to know what things you like. You have to be passionate about stuff. You have to be skilled. And I think it's really, you know, like going back to the skill thing, something to really emphasize is knowing how to talk about not knowing how to do stuff, knowing how to acknowledge that you can't do something. Those two are skills. You can train those, and people are drawn to that too. So like one of the most contemptible traits, excuse me, one of the most contemptible traits that a lot of like particularly young guys kind of bring to the fore, especially when they're talking to women, is, you know, the mansplaining, the always feeling like they need to have an answer, always feeling like they need to be a leader, all of that stuff. And I think that comes from that pressure that we put on guys that says, you know, this is what a man is. A man always has the answers. A man is always like, you know, strong and what's the word I'm looking for?
Stoic.
Yeah, let's go with stoic. That's yeah. But really, I think what would be like so much more, and in fact, like through practice, I can only speak from my own experience, but what people tend to find a lot more appealing is a guy who admits when, oh no, I've never heard about that before. Oh no, I don't understand, and gives someone else the floor to talk about it and gives somebody else the space to have their thing as well. That is also a skill worth developing.
My take, actually, no. You know, I don't think all boys should aspire to be himbos. I think not everyone needs to live a passive life, and that there's a lot of value to be taken away from having ambition or being a go-getter without using the regular manosphere dog whistles. But like the himbo, boys can learn to adapt to the world around them, a world that's constantly changing and looks nothing like their parents' or even their older brother's world. What we can learn from the himbo is that when we have confidence in ourselves, it makes going through the world that much easier. When we're allowed to live as our authentic self and chase joy and chase friendships and be okay with not being the main character all of the time, there's a happiness that comes from that, a knowing that I think the himbo has access to that the cynic or even the hunk doesn't. The himbo to me is an unknowing constructivist, constantly going through different world experiences, and instead of doubling down when an experience doesn't fit his worldview, he allows himself to be open, to be innocent enough to let it change his worldview for the better, or to not let it change it at all. For the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk about how the left doesn't know how to speak to boys. And I think that's bullshit, because here is me speaking to you right now. If you want to be more confident in life, you're not going to find it by trying to cosplay as someone else. The confidence you seek, the community that you seek, comes from you embracing what you actually like. Because what you actually like, you're an expert in. And when you're an expert in something, you can be confident in what you're talking about. And you know what's sexy? Confidence. Not any particular type of confidence, just the confidence that you kind of know what you're doing. that you don't make other people nervous with your own anxiety. That is one of the biggest tips I think I could ever give to young boys, and something that I didn't figure out until in the middle of college, when it one day just kind of clicked, and I realized that I was having a lot more success, or I was having a lot more fun at trying to be a man when I stopped trying to be any particular one. All that being said, I still aspire to be a himbo, maybe because as a person who is cursed by my own overthinking and intellect, I yearn for an existence where I just don't have to think about a lot, but also because himbos show an alternate version of manhood that naturally integrates traditional forms of masculinity while showing you that you don't have to commit to the whole bit if you don't want to. They show me the flexibility of personhood, that the power of being a man truly is being able to do what you want, what you actually want, not what men before you have said or what a person you paid $5,000 for their course is telling you will work. Alphas tell me I'm not a man if I'm chasing my joy. Himbos tell me being a man is chasing the joy. The joy of not taking yourself so seriously, the joy of being in the company of your friends, the joy of celebrating your friends' successes and knowing that you helped them along the way because you gave them an ear to listen to or a joke to laugh at. At the end of the day, I think I like the himbo because it proves that you can be a man while also thinking of others, that you can not take a space and still command respect. And even more than that, you might command love. You might get a friend or two out of being the one who helps. And I don't know, that just seems like a really good alternative to the idea of winner takes all brunches with Jay-Z and, you know, manosphere shit. Because that's the thing. Himbos don't care. Why do you?